It's the morning star drive on 17.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome to the MSD on 117.8. It's Tuesday, May 27th, and so happy for you joining us, and we are ready to start another day together with the Lord. So subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. So today we have an exciting podcast for you. We mentioned last time that for Tuesdays, and so if you weren't able to catch last week's, but you're here this week, you might know that Pastor Sky asked me to cover the Tuesday segments for the MSC 117.8, and so we're really excited for this. But yes, so for now, we don't really know what the segments for Tuesday will be called, but for today, we have kind of part two to the story that I was sharing last week. Because today, I was like talking with some members and going over how, like, for each of us, our stories are like kind of obvious to us, like the events that played out in our life that brought us to where we are today. But it's really not, like common knowledge for everyone else, right? Like, even in passing, I think I can't remember when this was, but it was quite recent. Oh, maybe it was when I was in Malaysia, but I remember I actually asked Pastor Sky because I know that I don't really know if he wants this publicly announced, but I know what his original name was, so I asked him like, hey, P Sky, like, when did you get your name and how did you get it, right? So for those of you guys who have been listening to MSC on 117.8 or who know Pastor Sky, you may know how he got his name, but for me that was something new, right? Because it was something that I never asked him before, I never heard. So even these kind of things, like for him, he knows clearly when he got that name, but for us it's news. And even when we recount those stories, we actually gain a lot of things, right? And so even for us too, even for the stories and the memories that are obvious to us, we obviously live forgetting those things too, if we don't take action on them in our daily lives, if we're not recounting them, if we're not testifying about them. So I wanted to just take the time out to share part two of that story. And I think part one was kind of like the better part of high school, and like kind of starting to discover this faith. And then like today I want to kind of go into the time in college, and I think college is probably the big part. Yeah, so that'll be what's for today. And as you guys might have seen yesterday, we didn't have 2G Talks as the segment to round off our Monday. So today we will be having 2G Talks, but even with this, I'm not entirely sure how it'll go because I really really appreciate the segment, but seeing it as it's something that I've been doing for the last like 2 years, and I'll be going over many of these things myself on Tuesday, it kind of feels like maybe it's a little redundant because like the first part of the episode will kind of cover, I think, a lot of perspectives that second gen would have, but I'll get to that point later too. But so with this, how's everyone doing, right? Like this week is the week of Alpha Day, and so we have many important and exciting things happening in Providence, right? So many things to pray for and many things for like all of us to work on together, right? So, and don't forget, even with Alpha Day, this time around, don't forget that we have Q&A Thursday every single week. So, so get those questions ready and send them to P Sky when you can't. And if you haven't yet, leave likes and comments to build our community. I'm deeply appreciative of the comments that you guys left last week, and I'm following along. And because especially this segment is new, even for myself and for each of you guys, if there's specific things that you would like me to think about or to talk about, feel free to leave them down, in the comments below, or just shoot me a message somehow. If you want to send a message to me but you have no idea, we do have that email address to 2G Talks. I would like to be better at checking it, but if there's just casual inquiries you have, feel free to leave let Pastor Sky know, right? He has all my contact information, and I don't mind people here from reaching out if they have something. Yeah, so really, let's get up and support each other each and every day like this. And with that too, we want to make sure that you guys know about the Rebel Pastor live streams, right? That Pastor Sky's been doing for a while now. So if you have been logging on or if you haven't been, they are happening every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern time, or Wednesday 10 a.m. Korean time. So if you have any newcomers, who you want to introduce the word to, please send him that link, and also hop on to join Peace Guy on his live streams, right? Like, help him answer his questions, right? That he asks the newcomers, and help be part of internet ministry in an exciting new way. So we really wish Pastor Sky, good luck, and we really hope to see you guys there for these live streams. Once again, there are Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern time, or Wednesday at 10 a.m., Korean time. So yes, once again, how's everyone doing? Hope you guys had a great weekend. For those of you who live in the United States, we had the long weekend with Memorial Day. For those of you around the world who haven't had that day off, it's a day to commemorate those who have fought in wars of the past, soldiers, and who passed away. Right, so we have like 2 days in the U.S. where we kind of celebrate soldiers. It's like Veterans Day, which are for like living U.S. soldiers who are have been serving in the military but are currently still alive, and then Memorial Day that commemorates like those who have passed on. So it's a great time to be able to celebrate and to commemorate all the people who have run hard. And for us too, I think it's a time where we can even think about like spiritually, right, all of our ancestors of faith who have run diligently for us so that we could be here today, right? So hope you guys have had a great weekend with that too, right? Like for me, this weekend we went down to Sequoia National Park. It's one of the national parks like located here in California. And for me, like, national parks are something that I think are just so great about living in the U.S. Right? Like Sequoia National Park. Many people like even within the U.S. might not know of that one in particular, but it's close to Yosemite. Right, and more people might know and have heard of Yosemite, right? So, Yosemite, Sequoia, like Kings Canyon, and there's I think a new one like right above Yosemite, right north of it. But all of these national parks and national forests, they're all part of the Sierra Nevada mountain range, right? So it's that mountain range that's on the eastern side of California, and that touches like to the neighboring state of Nevada, right? So yeah, it's a huge mountain range. So it's like divided into like 4 different national parks. And Sequoia, like for me and like for my family, it's particularly like a memorable place because that's like the first ever like national park that we went to when we moved to the United States like 20 years ago. And it's not just the first ever national park, it's like the first ever like family trip that we had when we like immigrated to the United States, right? I think it was like probably within like the first 2 months of flying over from Korea. Like we were like, I was 6 years old and my brother was 7. No, my brother was 5. And it was like such a memorable time because it was like so different from Korea. Like I think like if you're like coming here, like Yosemite and Sequoia, like those kind of places will make you really feel like, wow, like this place is different, right? So as a 6-year-old, it was like such a memorable place. Like one of the things that Sequoia is known for is it houses like sequoia trees, which like if you guys haven't heard of them before, these are like one of the largest kinds of trees in the world, right? Like so, and the largest tree in the universe is located in Sequoia National Park, right? It's actually it's just the largest tree in the world, but I like to say largest tree in the universe because as we know, this earth and this place is the only place with living trees and with living matter, right? And so yeah, so you can rightfully say it's the largest tree in the universe. So California is really interesting because it has both the largest trees in the universe and it also has the tallest ones, right? And they're not the same. There's like 2 varieties of these like really huge trees, and these trees are like they're crazy, right? The ones that have reached this like gargantuan size, they're like over like 2,000 years old, right? And like some of them, I think the oldest tree in this forest is 3,200 years old, right? Which is like insane, right? Because like U.S. history itself is only approximately like 300-400 years, and so before that, like these trees existed, and even before that, right, even longer than the New Testament, right? Like that tree was alive before even Jesus came, right? So that's a crazy, 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 old tree. Right, so the tallest trees in the world are located on the western coast of California. So they live right next to the water. I mean, not right next to the beach, but along the coastline of California. And these trees mostly get their moisture through the fog. Because if you like look through like from California all the way up to Seattle, it's really foggy along the coastline. So like that's where it gets its water from. And so those are the kind of redwood trees. So these redwood trees, like one of them in that forest is considered the tallest tree, in the entire world. But that tree, they don't, tell visitors because they don't want like tourists to go and to find where it is and like I don't know, like do something to it. So we know that it's in that forest, but they don't tell you specifically which one it is. But the largest tree in the world, and so this is like a slight difference, right? So there's tallest, and this is the largest in terms of like volume, in terms of size, right, and in terms of weight. So the largest tree in the world are these type of sequoia trees, and sequoias are located right only in the Sierra Nevada mountains in like the southern part. And so I don't know if past this guy's like listening to this part, but this is also where we had our national SS retreat about 3 years ago. And Pastor Scott was there for that too. So it was like part of Sequoia National Forest, and we had a really great time there. And these trees, it's so crazy because their seeds kind of spread in the same way that pine trees do, right? So they have like this a cone like thing, or like a pine cone, and I don't really know what they're called in different languages, right? Like in Korean, they're called like sorbangur, right, for the pine trees, right? So like there's it's I guess I don't really know why it's called a cone in English because it's not really like what you think of like a traffic cone or a sports cone, right? So it's like this like round like spherical shape, and the cones that come out from these sequoias are like maybe about the size of a golf ball, like maybe a little smaller. So they're tiny, right? And the seeds within those cones are like the same size as a pine seed. They're tiny, like they're maybe the size of man. I'm trying to think of a good like maybe the tip of a pen. Yeah, like if you're including like the whole tip of a ballpoint pen, they're about that size. So they're really tiny. So they went from that something that small into something so tremendously big that it makes up the tallest living tree in the universe, right? Like so one of the comparisons that they had on on like the tree like right in front of it, this tree has a name, that the tallest tree, the largest tree they like set aside. It's called the General Sherman tree, and they said like looking up at this tree is like a human being looking up at this tree is like the same view that like a mouse has looking up at a 6 foot human being, right? So it's a pretty fun comparison. But yes, it's such a tremendous thing, and taking that in, right? Like coming from Korea, where like I don't know, like the largest trees are like maybe like some of the pine trees that we see like in Wonmyeongdong and like across like the nation, to seeing something this gargantuan, right? Like the diameter of like one of these trees can go up to like it was like something like 36 feet, and like the largest width of this is like 40 feet in terms of diameter. And so I like, yeah, I know not everyone uses feet, but if you were to look at this tree, it would take like 30 people like hugging the tree, like with their arms span like spread out in order to be able to wrap around the tree. It's crazy. It's like so big. And so like seeing like going coming from Korea, like coming into seeing this thing, it was like, wow, we're really in America, right? So I was really inspired by this, and I was really grateful that I got to spend time with my family. But going into our first break, like the part that like one of the things I wanted to share from this trip and from seeing that tree was like today, like for Sunday, yeah, at the time I'm recording right now, for me it's Sunday. Like one of the songs that we sang for praise was the Palace of Providence song, right? And in part of that, the Palace of Providence song, it talks about like how like Wonmyeongdong was built, right, and this natural temple was built in the place set by the Trinity's will, right? And like in all the things that we talk about Warmingdong and all the things that the Trinity have shared with us and that Sonsangnim has emphasized to us, that Warmingdong is something that is representative of like the people in Providence, right, and of us, right, the people who've been made and have been chosen by the Trinity and have been developed in this sense. And I think like one of the things that was written on the sign for like this General Sherman sequoia tree, it said that like um, the size of the tree is not exactly indicative of the age of the tree. meaning like the largest tree that was there is not actually the oldest of the sequoia trees in that field, right? In that forest. And it said like actually the oldest tree is about 1,000 years older than this largest tree, than the General Sherman tree. So that's like really interesting, right? And so it kind of gives a comparison. So they said these trees, like when they're first sown in the ground, they like sprout up rapidly, right? So these trees, like we said, it lasts like they live like thousands of years, right? And so the first like 600 years, these trees will like sprout up and grow as tall as they can, but they're not very like thick, right? They're very like thin. And so for like the first 600 years, they'll like grow really, really tall, like as tall as they possibly can. And then the older they'll get like wider and wider and wider. But it was saying that like this tree, this General Sherman tree, was able to grow to the size and to the height that it is because it was planted in an ideal location. Right. So I was actually really surprised that it used that term, like ideal location. And so it was saying like how actually like trees that are grown and are planted in places that, aren't the best spot, they grow much slower and like much thinner. So even a tree that is 100 years old, it only had the thickness of like a coin. Right. So as you said, like these trees, they try to go as like tall as possible and as much as they can, right? Really within the first 600 years. But if they aren't planted in the right place, then they only grow to the size of a quarter coin, right? And so like, I don't know how big. I don't know how big the coins in each of the countries that you guys live in, but a quarter is maybe maybe about the size of a ping pong coin. I think a ping pong ball. A ping pong ball might be a little thicker, but yeah. So if it's grown in the improper place with like unideal conditions, then it only grows to that level of thickness, right? And so and that's comparing to a tree where like we were able to like see some of the trees that had been cut down or had fallen over and that they had preserved, and a person can walk through comfortably, right, in the trunk of the tree, not on top of the trunk of the tree, but through the tree itself. And so we're comparing something that's like the thickness of a ping pong ball to something like so big that people can fit in it. And they said they used to actually house horses like in like the trunk of the tree, right, when people were camping there and like were like harvesting those trees for lumber. So with this song, right, we're gonna go into our first break for today, right? And it's a Palace of Providence song, right? And it talks about how the Trinity developed Mormondong, and because it was a place set by the Trinity's will. And so with this, I hope that each of us and each of the listeners today will be able to feel that they themselves were set aside for this purpose, that they were sown into fertile fields, into fertile soil, and that they have been raised plenty with the word, right? And so that we would produce a crop that's 100 times, 1,000 times bigger than the seeds that were sown. So yes, we'll get into the first break of today with Palace of Providence.
Mormondong temple was built here within the place set by the Trinity's will. In this temple we met the Lord and fulfilled the rapture of love. Here we faced trials raging like wind, but despite fears, blizzards and rain, Palace of Providence became my home. I cannot leave, Lord, I'll stay by your side.
Yes, so that was our first break with Palace of Providence. And so in kind of like related to this, today we'll go into our first main segment. And I said that I kind of wanted to share the rest of the story from last week. It's kind of like hard to boil down, just our life into one story. And so I'm not just gonna try to attach like some, random like moral or some random like point to the story. But like kind of tying it back to last week and picking it back up where I started, I graduated from high school back in 2015. Right. And so like back in 2015, that's like, when we had the first day of life, right? When we celebrated that joyous moment in 316. And so there's like something related to it that I think kind of like ties into part of the story. And it's something that I've shared like close to 316 before. But it was like the first time that we were celebrating this day like in this manner, right? And like when it happened, like no one knew like what really that day would entail, right? With the Holy Son's ascension and stuff like that. So like before that, like I don't know if you guys like recall like what it was like back in like 2015 and like 2014 and before, but we had like so much word coming out, right? Like at that time. And so like on Fridays, like sometimes on Saturdays, Sundays, we're like always at church and we're like getting prepared, like we're getting ready for the rapture in 316 and all those kind of things. And then like we didn't know specifically that it would happen on that day, but like I think I like for me I was like in this kind of this period of euphoria like in high school, like really trying to intake in the word. And then for 316 that day, it was Monday. I like remember this to this day. It was Monday on that year. And so in 316 in Korea, like they were meeting in Warmyeongdong. And for us here in like on the Pacific coastline, like when they were meeting in Korea on Monday, it was like in the afternoon or so, like or afternoon or evening, right, in Pacific time on Sunday. And I remember that at the time, they sent an announcement saying that everyone should try to gather at church. Right, like even though like for us it was like Sunday, they're like everyone should try to gather at church, but at the time, and I've shared this part of the story before, like like things weren't really in a situation like I think people can like kind of like see like how this might be, right? Like your family's been at church like all day and then like they just went home, and so it was kind of like a weird like I didn't really find it that I could ask my parents, oh, like, can we go back to church, right? Like, even though that sounds like very benign, like retrospectively, like you guys know how it can be if like not everyone is like trying to participate in like every single little thing, and then there you are like trying to go to this thing. So I was like, okay, like let's just join from home. And then later we get the announcement, right, from something that, it was the day of the Holy Son's ascension, right? And I'm sure like it wasn't just me, but many other people may have had regrets if they didn't celebrate 316 that day. But like think about it, like at that time, right? I was barely actually like so my birthday is like 5 days after 316, right? It's on March 21st. So being a senior in high school, I was 17 years old on that day, right? So I wasn't even 18 years old yet, but I was a 17-year-old, like high school, like teenager, like going through this, like, trying to invest like so much into like this history, like for the first time in my life, like wanting to give as much as I can. And then I miss such a big, like monumentous, like occasion, right? And so I was like devastated. I didn't tell anyone that at the time. And, like I at the time, like I wasn't very open about sharing like what I was thinking, what I was going through, what I was feeling with any members or leaders beyond like superficial level stuff. So I didn't tell anyone this, but I was like so disappointed in myself for a long time. And it wasn't like it didn't transition from point A to point B where I was like, okay, I'm gonna make up my mind even harder because I missed this moment. But I think just because of the sheer disappointment of it all like I like kind of redoubled down on my efforts to like work hard. Like eventually, like it took some time to process it, of course. But so yeah, that's what it was like going into college, and that's what it was like at the end of high school, because like I was like so invested into this. I started kind of like closing off some of my connections with like people like at school. I definitely still had many close friends and friends who I saw like all throughout like the end of high school before going into college. But I remember like running into like like the insurmountable issues with like the friends at the time, right? Like go like last week I shared the story of of my friend like cheating on the on one of my other friends, and how that like kind of sucked in everyone at our school. So because of those things, like the kids at the time, like and this wasn't just like one or two people, and this wasn't just my close friends, it was like literally everyone in our grade, right? Like they kind of had these like parts of themselves that were like just incongruent, right, with how I wanted to live, right, and how we wanted to live in Providence, right? So, and of course, like those are things that we can't judge them on, like if they haven't listened to the word yet, and if I hadn't tried to evangelize them. But at the time, I was like, okay, like I needed to develop this part of myself. So, like all the things that I didn't feel like were too important, like some like times, like seeing my friends, things that I would regularly do, I wouldn't do anymore. I wouldn't go out to see them for certain things. I was like, this isn't very important. Like one of the things I remember during my high school graduation, I really felt to myself like, is this really like that big of a moment, right? Graduating from high school. So like as soon as the graduation was over, like my family left like with some of our church members to go get dinner, and I remember I didn't really say bye to a lot of friends. And there's like a number of reasons for that too. Like up until that point, like growing up in the U.S., my family moved around a lot, so I've been to over like 13 different schools, right? Like from all the way the time that I started kindergarten in Korea, and then moving here from like elementary school. Like I moved like 4 or 5 different times in different in elementary school and middle school and high school. And so it was like I think when you're really young, it's kind of traumatic, but then after a while, like I started to really enjoy it because you get to meet just so many different kinds of people. And yes, sometimes that is difficult, but like it shows you just how like big and different, God's world is, and all the things like in creation. And it kind of really makes you think differently, and to be perceptive and open to being corrected in your thinking, right? And the things that you like didn't know about. And so for me, at the time I got in high school graduation, I was like, okay, if these people are valuable to me, then I'll still find a way to keep in contact with them. And like graduation isn't where we're saying bye. But so I remember I had that thought process, and I just went to get dinner with my family and with our church members. And then I got a call later from one of my friend's older sisters. And then she was calling me. She's like, "Hey, like where are you?" And I was like, "Oh, like I'm already at dinner with with some of my family." And she was like like saying like, "Hey, like like your friend's crying because you left without taking pictures and saying bye." And so retrospectively, like maybe I could have like done those kinds of things, but at the time I was really feeling like, wow, like okay, there are these important things to life, like living according to this this foremost goal of rapturing, of like becoming perfect, like before the Trinity, and like living in this way that's going to produce this ideal world, like living according to like these conditions and the example that the Lord has set, and according to the word, like that was the priority. So that's kind of the mindset that I had like towards the end of high school, and I definitely retained that like going into college too, right? And so even for that too, there's that part of the message today, for us on Sunday. Like I like for you guys too. Like what was your biggest takeaway from the word? Right? What was something that kind of implicitly resonated with you, right? Like for me, it was like the part that said that God prepared things like in advance, right? And then like it's something you specifically even gave the example that like there are some things that people that God prepared like 20 years ago, right? For that person. And like because of the thing that he prepared, that person 20 years later was able to like take action on it and gain from it. And like for me, like that, like even the 20 years was like perfectly in resonance with like what's happening now, because like right now is the 20th year that my family's lived in the US, right? And we went to go see Sequoia, which was like the first place that our family went to, right? So like 20 years, like all that time, like thinking back on it, like all of the dots kind of connected. But yeah, for each of you guys, like what was the thing that like reached out and screamed out to you in like this week's message? Yeah, so like understanding that 심정 of God, like seeing like what he's done for us like from the beginning, and like the trail, the paths that he laid out, right? Like in the moment, sometimes it feels just like breadcrumbs, right? Like breadcrumbs, like laying out the trail. And it's like really hard to see. But looking back on it, man, like the things that God has done for each and every one of us, it's just so crystal clear too. Right. So even with like with going to college for me, like this is something that I testify about regularly, but I really should do it more. And I think I should do it in a way that like shows my appreciation more, right? Because I like sometimes like even the physical parts of going to college, right? Like the steps that went into it, even that I'm grateful for. But the spiritual things are even more incomparable, right? But sometimes I think I talk just about the physical things. So I'll give an example of that, right? Then this is like the first things that I talk about with going to college that God helped me with. And the physical thing was that I was contemplating between two main school choices. Like the first was like New York University, right, which is one of the highest ranked public universities like in the entire world, and it was like right next to it was right next to the church, right? It's in New York, right? And so at that time I had already visited New York before for the first time, and like New York's one of the biggest churches, so like obviously I was like, wow, like I would love to go there, love to be part of that church and to help run and to learn a lot like while I can. So like my mind was like kind of for New York mostly. And the second option was UC San Diego. And UC San Diego is like about an hour and a half down from LA. And there is a church there, right? And San Diego is actually a place I sometimes stayed. But, at the time, that wasn't something that I knew or that I really thought about. But San Diego is a place where sometimes you set the 21-day fasting prayer condition, right? Like where you see the picture of him like on the couch, where he's really skinny and he didn't want to have that photo taken, but then he received the inspiration that, this is something for history, right? And so like if that photo hadn't been taken, there's like no photographs from that time, because it was really a time where he really wanted to set deep spiritual condition, and he didn't like have photographs taken while he was in San Diego. He didn't go out, he didn't do anything like that. But yeah, but it was a deep place, right? But I wasn't thinking about it at the time. But so San Diego is like, located inside California. It is a really great school. It's one of the best universities like in California, and it would like physically, like it was like much cheaper, much closer, and there is a church there, and I was close to some of the members there. Like my former head leader was head leading there. We had some second gen from our church who went there to San Diego, and there were like other like blessed family and other members whom I had seen periodically growing up over there too. All right, so like I was considering like between these two different options, but even this, like God prepared the way, right? Because at the time there were some other second gen who were also going to college at the same time, and for me and my family, I was the first within our family to go to a 4-year university like in America, right? And so there was like so much we didn't know. Like my parents are nervous too, and they were like trying to figure out all these things, like even financial aid, because like college is getting like increasingly more expensive too. And so we wanted to like fill out all of the financial aid like forms, right, in order to receive like grants and scholarships and loans for college. And like my mom was like speaking to some of the other families who had like these kind of things, and they were telling her like how they had paid for a service to fill out like these forms like for them to make sure that there's no like issues. And so because my mom got nervous, she signed me up to get those forms filled out too. But like the crazy thing that happened was that with New York University, the people that filled out the form, they filled it out incorrectly. And so my first year going to NYU, I would get like zero financial aid, right? Which is crazy. Because like New York University is like, sure, it's one of the top schools in the world, but it's also one of the most expensive, right? Especially for a public school too, right? It's like, I think for me going from out of state to there, the tuition was something like $60,000 a year, $70,000 a year. So, and that's just tuition too. So I think with like living costs, like it's New York, right? Like one of the most expensive cities to live in the world. Like I think I could have spent like $100,000 a year, right, for the 4 years that I would go there, right? So that's crazy. That's insane, right? So like if I had gone there, in 4 years, I would have spent like $400,000, like if that, or like maybe more, maybe less, to get that education. And so like thinking about the life that I would have had to live afterwards with 400K in debt, I would have to find an occupation that can pay off that loan like right away, right? There's no delay. And so I like no think like living that way, I would have had to prioritize like living like, to pay off that loan. I don't think that I could have lived as spiritual of a life as I could have, if I had gone to New York, right? Like, I love the members there and I still wanted to go, but I'm glad looking back on it that God didn't send me. So that's the physical reason. And so in comparison, just the physical part, like going to San Diego, I actually managed to graduate in 3 years. Right. And so like I saved like a significant amount of money because I graduated an entire year early. And because it's within California, like I won't say specifically how much like debt I have remaining from that, but it was like completely manageable. It's like something that like I won't have to worry about like at all for my life. And so I'm so grateful for the Trinity for that, because when I think about the 5 years like even after college too, I got to run like in San Francisco, and I got to like spend a lot of time going to like all of these different places like Hawaii, and the last 3 months in Korea, like going to Malaysia and Japan, and running for the SS department and all of these things. And all of that, like following college would not have been possible had I gone to like a much more expensive school. And so like that's the physical part, and that's the part that I can talk about even to people in the world too. But spiritually looking at it, like the experiences in San Diego were really things that God had prepared in advance too, right? So like the things that I retained with me, like going from high school, like in 2015, post 316, right? To San Diego was like, okay, I'm gonna try to engross in as much of the word as I possibly can. Right. So even when I went down to San Diego, and all of these things were things I didn't know at the moment, right? And these were things that were uncovered one at a time. And so one of the things that was happening in San Diego was that San Diego, and specifically UC San Diego, was the school in American Providence at the time that had the most amount of campus members that attended the same university. Right, so that was kind of a mouthful, but hopefully that registered. So like, LA, San Francisco, like New York, those were three of like the biggest, and Houston were like, three, four of the biggest churches that we had in American Providence. But even the campus members there, like if they had campus members, were like all scattered in different like universities and such. But UC San Diego, we had like, 4 or 5 members at the time. And this, mind you, this is a tiny church, right? We had like maybe like 12 people when I went over, and like 4 or 5 of them were from one family, right? So this is a small church, but 5 of like the members were college students, like at the same university. So that was such a huge thing because we got to like run together, like directly on campus where all of us were already studying. And so, when we went out to evangelize, when we went to set condition, when we went to have events, like it was just so easy, right? There was no like reaching super far in order to connect to each other because we were like all there. And so I'm really thankful to God for that experience too. And like there were like not just that, but like because like the moment I got there, I was like so engrossed in absorbing the word. But this wasn't a time where, like I said, where I was like opening up to people and really like talking about myself, especially to like leaders in the church, right? Like, I was very like respectful, and I worked really hard. And so I like kind of like did more things through action rather than through words. So, like the leaders, like they were like, wow, like, they entrusted me with a lot of things, and not just me, but all of our campus members, they were really all hardworking. So they entrusted us with a lot, and we did, so much together. And even though like my obsession at the time was really with the word, but they started entrusting me with so many other responsibilities, like on top of the word. And this is something that I see that God, entrusted, right? Like there was some other second gen at the church, and they started having, not just me, but one other person who started to not just manage the second gen from like the perspective of a manager, but to manage by doing things together, by having like like programs together, like with all of us included. And that kind of like led to big things because both me and this other second gen, we became like the second gen reps for AP, like following that time. So I can really see that it was a big thing. I don't know if it was a big thing for this other person, but it was definitely a big thing for me. And like we had to do all of the missions at church, right? We had to do like praising, we had to do presiding, we had to do tech, we had to, help with the cleaning, we had to help do ministry at the college campuses and doing all the events. And so there were like so many things that I got to experience in San Diego that like yeah, I realistically probably would not have been able to do in New York, right? Because like New York is much bigger, and right at the time, right, I'm like 18, 17, right? So even though you want to entrust things to like the younger members and such, it's kind of hard to give like an 18-year-old a lot of responsibility, right? But because I was in San Diego, like I distinctly remember that that was the first time where like people were asking for my opinions, right? And like so we had a new church a head leader who came like shortly after I arrived there. And yeah, and like she was like automatically asking for my opinion, and for me that was like such a big formational thing, right? Like formational for my faith, right? And I was like, wow, like I'm being held accountable and responsible, and I'm being asked for what I think, right? And like I think some kids they think of that as a privilege and they want that privilege, but really think about it, it's a responsibility, right? Like if someone's asking for your opinion, especially with church matters, it's something that you're responsible for, and it's a big thing. I think, I mean, and it is a privilege, but it's a huge responsibility too. But I remember doing those things, and I remember like there was a time where our church got not the church but the members' cars got broken into during the pre-dawn, right? Because we had quite a few female career members, and they were the ones who were setting like the most condition like during the pre-dawn, right? And our head leader was a female career member. And I think like the thieves who broke in, they like figured out that there was a pattern that between the hours of like 3 or 4 a.m. to like 6 a.m., no one's coming out of the office building, right? And there's like cars situated there. So a couple times the cars got broken into. So then like we moved to the school actually, right? Because I remember saying at the time, hey, actually the I think they keep the doors to the lecture halls open, right? Because it's technically a public university. And I don't know if there's actual specific like bylaws in the student conduct like handbook saying that we can or can't use the rooms, but they're open and they're unlocked. And so they're like, oh really, like can we use the rooms to set pre-dawn condition? And I was like, yeah, yeah, sure. And then my head leader afterwards, she said, okay, Eddie, so if we're setting condition at school, you're gonna be there, right? And before that, because I didn't have a way to get from the school to our church at the time during the pre-dawn hours, like pre-dawn wasn't something I really participated in. But because of that, that was like another responsibility and something I started to do, and I wasn't perfect with it, which was like really unfortunate because I was the one who was supposed to hold on to the tech computer, right? Because I'm the one that lives on campus. And so there were a couple times where the members came and I was supposed to, join pre-dawn and have the computer and stuff, but they didn't have it because I didn't show up, right? And so like they called me and I'd wake up and I'm like, no, right? Because I'd have like missed calls from my head leader, right? And they never held it against me, but I felt so guilty at the time, right? But there were like all of these experiences, and of course there were valleys like in my faith, like during that time too, and difficulties I went through. But it was like such yeah, such an important, such a formational time, right? Because like one of the other things I related to it was like all of the campus guys that we were evangelizing at the time, like I was the de facto manager for those lives, right? And like that's not something that like I did like the best job of necessarily, but what it entailed was that I had to sit in through all the lectures that the guys had to learn, right? And there were some days, some weeks I was like, man, like, do I have to go in again, right? Because like I said, there were also valleys to my faith too, and there was like school was so busy too, right? So on top of like school and all the things I was doing for myself personally, I was like, man, like, do I have to like, get out and like go sit in another lecture again? But every time I sat in, I actually felt that I gained more than than the newcomers did, right? So I was so thankful that I got to relearn that lesson, and I really think that that was like God teaching me, right? Because my head leader at the time, she taught really well, and I was like so grateful that I got to have that experience. Um, and there were some weeks where I would learn the same lesson like two, three different times, right? Because we had like two like active like guys who were learning the same lesson around the same time, and then like at a certain point, right? Because like after 2015, like something gave the direction saying that all second gen have to relearn the lesson, right? Because there's so many updates, right? Like if we had learned like before that when we were in middle school or elementary school, like lessons like the Holy Son, the Holy Spirit, Rapture, Advent, all of those things, like they weren't really like crystal clear yet, and there were like so many things that we had to relearn. And so because the second gen had to relearn, like even though I had passed and the other, the other second gen rep had passed, we had some second gen at church who hadn't passed like with the new lessons, and our head leader wanted everyone to learn, right? But it's kind of like weird, right? If like, you're all the same age but a couple of them are learning, but like the people who are learning see that that like there's like other kids there who don't have to learn. So because of that, they were like, my head leader say, hey, like, can you guys sit in for these lessons too? And it'll be like for all of you guys, when it's actually for these who guys who haven't passed. But because of that, some weeks I had to learn the lessons like three times, like the same lesson three different times. But each time, like God taught me something new, and there were like many miracles that happened too, right? So I distinctly remember at the time that like when the newcomers would learn, I would have like occasionally like this strong inspiration to like say something. But for me, like during the lessons, like for from beginning to finish for the lessons, I wouldn't say anything, and I would like listen, pay attention. I'd just be like an extra ear. And I think I really also had to be there because our head leader, was a woman, right? And so she was like, "Hey, can you be there so it's not just me and another guy, right?" So like, there's a manager present, right, who's also a guy. But then I would get an inspiration, and I would always hold it until the very end. And at the very end, my pastor would ask like, do you have anything to chime in to, Eddie? And it didn't happen like that from the beginning, but both she and I start to see that sometimes, I would like say something that was in tune with what the newcomer was going through. And so I remember like even like one of the first times we met a newcomer, like I had this strong inspiration to talk about a book that I had read in class, right? So I kind of waited, right? And that lesson was like the first time we were meeting. And so like it was like quite a long time. We were like probably there for over like an hour and a half or something. But at the very end, I talked about that book. And then like he like kind of looked at me like quizzically, right? Like the newcomer, and he like looked really curious. Like I think he wanted to get to know everyone from the beginning. Like you kind of feel it from his body language. But it was like when I started talking about that book that he seemed like really interested. Right, so the lesson ended and we were walking outside and we were kind of chit-chatting, and then like I was getting his contact information, and at the very end he was like saying like, hey, like that book that you were talking about, I like was passing by a book sale from our bookstore like right next to where we were having the lesson, and he picked up that exact book that I had mentioned, right? So even for him, that was probably like a crazy, like spooky kind of experience. But for me, it was just like such an affirmation of like, wow, like the Holy Spirit works in this way. Right, because up until then, like learning all the words, like learning all this knowledge, that the Holy Spirit is the spirit of inspiration, but like you have to experience it, right, and see it to know, right, to know clearly, and you have to act on it to see like how this acts in your life, right? So like there were all of these experiences in college, and then like to wrap up the story, I think like after graduating and even now I can see all of these impactful and important things, right? Because like I think like given the state of how like other not other churches, but like just in general like how it is for campus members, like in churches where campus members aren't like required to run, like especially like you wouldn't expect them to run like at the position of like leadership or anything like that. So like when we think even about people who graduate and become career members, like a lot of the times we don't expect them to run in the same way as leaders, right? And then you know sometimes like truth be told, like you don't expect them to have the same kind of capacity, right? And so like when we think of that, like when I graduated and went back home, people didn't have the same expectations, of me, like given that I had just come out from college, right? Even though there was like so many things that I had been doing for like 3 years in San Diego, when I came back, it was like kind of being like treated like a kid again to some degree. And then like the scripture that like that even Jesus said, right, where a prophet is welcome like everywhere like but his hometown, right? So I remember going through these couple years where like I had to kind of rebuild that kind of trust, right, in me, like from the local leaders like in San Francisco too. But even that was a good time because over time, like through action, they could really see that value and like really seeing and not just comparing but seeing like the kind of other experiences that like people my age, like the second gen my age going to different college campuses had. I can really see that God used those 3 years in San Diego to train me for this life of providence after. Yeah, so like both from high school through college, like these kind of experiences were things that God did from an early time to prepare us for this life of faith today. And so I'm really glad to have shared some of it with you guys. And I really want to hear from you guys about like some crucial times in your life, about like how God formed that too. And so with this, we're going to go into the second break for today before we enter our last segment. And so with this, last week we shared one of the new songs from the Sumney Boys, right, Until the End. And today, right, like in order to like help, promote the song even further and so that we get more situated to like hearing it and to listening to it, we're going to play it once again for you guys. So this is Until the End by the Sumney Boys.
I'ma make this short and sweet. Your time is done. You had your chance. You're finished. I'm going to the end, I don't quit, I'ma make it. Can see the finish line, I can feel it, I can taste it. Everything I say, I just do, I don't fake it. Your time is up, we're going all the way until the end.
It's not too late. Are you giving up already? Check it out. Here we go. It's not too late.
You chose this path cause you thought it was right for you. You can't give up right now when you know what you gotta do. Until the end, until the end, until the end. You chose this path cause you thought it was right for you. You can't give up right now when you know what you gotta do. Until the end, until the end, until the end. This the path to love I chose from the start. This the path to love forever I want. Man, thoughts are never enough, so I put you in my mind, yup, with every single thought. Even when I stumble, find my way up to the top. Coming to reach a higher levels, I can never stop. It's so easy to lose everything, but what's great about life is you can get it back. The type of life you want, you really have to make it. Give your heart, will in life, you will take it. This path of love, I'll never change. I guarantee you, I will stay the same. This a real love, no plastic. This a true love, not basic. So now we're going on to the end, to the end, hey. So now we're going on to the end, hey, hey. You chose this path cause you thought it was right for you. You can't give up right now when you know what you gotta do. Until the end, until the end, until the end. You chose this path cause you thought it was right for you. You can't give up right now when you know what you gotta do. Until the end, until the end, until the end. Oh,
Yes, so that was Until the End by the Sumney Boys. I'm really grateful, for them, for all of the things that they do. And I hope that many other people in Providence can continue to, make music and have creative endeavors, right? That's something that we talked about. So for our final segment for today, we're going to actually be having 2G Talks, right? Which is kind of like odd, seeing as how, like, I think the crux of today's segment was like speaking from the perspective of second generation anyways, but I shared this earlier before, but going forward, for this segment, I'd love to have like guests on this segment too, right? Like, there's so many second gen whom I met who are really amazing, and not just Providence second gen, but actually for everyone too, right? Because the goal of this segment, for me, was always try to connect the past to the future. And for us in Providence, right, because we're constantly seeking new things, right? Like, I think hearing from each of our experiences helps give a clearer picture of like what it is that we want to do, right, within Providence, and what kind of place we want this to be like going into the future, right? So I would love to have like guests on the segment, and so like I kind of had like two different ideas. Like, I would love to have someone else like record this and to kind of actually get the experience of like what it was like for Pastor Sky to ask me, like, even like 3 years ago now, like 3 years ago, to like be part of this moment, right? And it is kind of like a crazy experience, like in the beginning, like trying to like sift through it and to make this part. But I think like hearing from other people would really make a big difference. But like, let's say you're not the type of person to have your voice, like your audible voice out there, like feel free if you want, like, I'd be really willing to share your story like on your behalf if that's something you want to. So feel free to reach out to me, and like whether it's like written or whether it's verbally, like to help share your story and share like whatever it is that you want, to all of our members, right? And so I hope that there's not too big of a change from like what you guys are used to before to this, but that step by step that we'll do things in a new way. I was speaking to some of the members, and they know who they are. Like after last week's like full length episode, and they're sharing with me how like they use the time like listening to the MSC 117.8 to do like their chores, right? And so like you might already have each part mapped out with how Sky, Pastor Sky typically does things, right, with his intro and different segments and the different breaks. So I hope that this change in your Tuesdays isn't so drastic that it kind of throws your original schedule out the window. Yes, but so, with this, I'll kind of wrap up like, everything for today. And I just want to share like one last thing before we go. And so this actually has to do with the poll question that was posted for this week. Both last week and this week, Pastor Sky asked if I wanted to post a poll question. And so the question for this week is like, what do you want to know more of? Right. And so this kind of even ties to the story where I was sharing like in college, like listening to the lectures like 3 times in a week. Right. Like sometimes when these kind of things come up, we're like, oh my gosh, like there's another thing to do. There's like more to learn. But when you actually do it, you gain so much. Right. And so even like this week, like there's been so many announcements like locally for new programs that are happening, like both like here and like for like different departments we're in, and also like on the nationwide level. And so like there's going to be a leadership program for like using like something like lectures that he used to give to leaders. And I've heard some of it actually while I was in Korea, and so I guess they're available now in the US. So there was like that program, and they were asking people to sign up. And then for the campus and career guys here, there's going to be a lecture training program, and I started joining that too. And like when all of these things started to come up, I was like, man, like, should I be joining each of these things? Because, I'm actively lecturing right now, but I'm like so busy doing that and trying to do that. And so, but I was like, okay, like for me, like showing, showing support for the things that the members are doing, that's like a really important thing. So I was like, okay, I want to do it for that purpose too. But also like, I know how much it can benefit me when I actually do it. Like, even though like, kind of like trying to go into it, I'm like inching my toes forward in order to get there. But today, I listened to the lecture training program, and I was just like so moved by all the things that were shared. All right, it was actually the Peter and the Fish lesson, but I know the lecturer who did this lecture, and he's someone who has a lot of experience like teaching. and he's like one of like apparently like this is I think this is like one of the greatest CVs ever, right? But he's like one of the 30 lecturers that like Sensei acknowledges, and that's like I don't really know exactly what that means, but that's a crazy like like title to have, right? But yeah, no, he's like really good, right? He's a very experienced lecturer, and like when I listen to him, like he takes his time going through the things like point by point, and he doesn't like he doesn't like blurt out the answer like exactly what the direction that's something he's been giving to us. He doesn't blurt out the answer, but he gives the reasons, and he makes you like uh like I guess like extract out the answer right, from the reasons. So yeah, we were going through Peter and the Fish, and it's like an elementary lesson, right? But like hearing it again and hearing it in this way, it was like really, really like great, and right, it really moved me, and I'm really glad that I joined. So with that, like related to the poll question, for each of you guys today, like thinking about where you are in life, like where you are in this history, and thinking about how it's going to be Alpha Day this week too, and like commemorating the beginning of history, what is it that you want to know more of? Like for you, what is it that you want to study? What is it in terms of this history that you want to do? Right? And so the couple of options that we gave were about biblical history, right? Do you want to know more about the Bible? Right. So for me, like actually studying with Pastor Sky over the last few years, that's one thing that I've definitely learned more of. But of course, like something recently said that even if you don't know the Old Testament and the New Testament, like knowing what God is doing today and like knowing the word that pertains to complete testament, that's like even more crucial. But of course, like on top of that, like if you know that, then also learning about the Old Testament, New Testament is important too, right? For me, like as a second gen, and like because there was so much emphasis on like the current word like from the time I was born, like I think there's so many gaps. There were so many gaps in my knowledge about the Old Testament and the New Testament. And I'm sure like the same can be said for a lot of people listening too, right? Like people who came, who wasn't, from the former faith, or who even if they were like, didn't really know like all the things about the Bible too clearly, right? So do you want to learn about biblical history? Or like with that too, like for you, when you think of what you want to learn right now, like do you want to learn more about what God is doing today, right, in your life? And like that sounds like an obvious answer, but specifically when I thought of that answer choice, I was referring to like the stories, right? Like when I went to Korea, like I heard the story behind the symbolic pine tree and like the testimony about Warmingdong. And so like there's these like specific stories, right? And then like I heard like in Korea, 선생님's doctor, right? The doctor who's like personally in charge of 선생님, like gave a testimony recently, and like they were sharing like the specifics of like their life and their experiences, like being like 선생님's personal doctor. And I like I saw my dad like listening to it, and he doesn't like listen to like all the things that are going on, but like he was like really interested in that one. And so like these are like the stories of what something is doing now, what the Trinity are doing now, right? So is that what you would say is like one of your primary interests or something that you're curious about? Or is learning about the word like something that you really want to do? Like when you think of like both the lectures and the current messages coming out, like do you feel like wow, like I need to learn more, right? Like right now I said like I'm participating in that lecture training. Is that something you want to have for yourself? Like learning more specifically about like any of those things. And like the last option that we put was like connecting the word to life, right? Because that's also a huge one, right? So these are all like four equally important things that each of us could want to learn about. Or if there's other options, feel free to provide an answer in the comments, like for the poll, so that other people can think, right? Because we all have to learn, right? And so one of the things that the lecture training for today, like one of the things the lecture said at the end was that Providence history is always a place about doing things in a new way, right? And so like even with like parables, like when like Jesus came to the Israelites, right? Like there was that part, right? Like he said like when you read John chapter 6 clearly, right? There's a part where the crowd that follows Jesus, they try to forcefully make Jesus into like the king, right? And they say like like our ancestors experienced like receiving the bread that came from heaven, like the manna, right? And then so they asked Jesus like, Jesus, can you like help us to experience that too? And can you bring down bread from heaven? Right? And then Jesus said that he is the bread, right? His answer was so like crazy, and he said he is the bread, right? And then like so people like had such a hard time understanding that message, and the whole crowd leaves, right? Even though they wanted to make him into king, right? But because they couldn't understand the word clearly, they left, right? And then so after that, like Jesus talks to the disciples, and he says, "You too don't want to leave, do you?" Right? And then like that's when Peter answered, right, that like, Lord, to whom will we go, right? You have the word of eternal life. And so like Peter was someone who understood Jesus, right? And he was the one, right? Like, and so the lecture really, like, he helped point us to, right, like, imagine like there's this huge crowd, right, of people who were following Jesus, but they leave, right? Because this whole crowd, they couldn't understand, and they came because they experienced miracles, and they wanted miracles, and they had a faith that's based on miracles. But Peter, he knew, right, not just in that moment but just in general, but he knew in that moment that Jesus wasn't talking about bread, about food, right, and referring to himself as food, but he saw that this was the food and this is the bread that gives eternal life, right? The word, right? So he helped break down, like, he knew what the parable was referencing, and so he knew the word and the law that pertained to that time period. And so for each of us too, right, we have to understand and do things in a new way, and we have to figure out how the word applies to today. And so yeah, that last option was like learning about how to connect the word to life currently. Yeah, so I hope that you guys have a good time answering the poll. And yeah, and as always, we said by this Thursday, if you have any questions, get them to Pastor Sky and join today live, right? Like today is Tuesday for us here in the US and in the continental like countries here in America. And so I really hope that you guys can help join in and support Pastor Sky on the live stream for the Rebel Pastor. And with this, we'll catch you guys next week on the Tuesday segment of the MSD 117.8.
Stop me when I'm like this. I got my head in the zone, I'm on the Morning Star Drive,